my God, why are you killing me? Why are you executing me?" His words are precisely recorded. My God, why have you forsaken me?" And this brings up another question in the third angel's message. The fearsome references to God's wrath. What is the wrath of God? Is it anything like our human anger? Many fear God because of a misunderstanding of this subject. And 1 John says, fear has to do with punishment, not worship. Perfect love casts out all fear. If we do fear, we don't know God well. Reverence, yes, but fear and terror, never. I worked for a long time, for my satisfaction, on this question of the wrath of God, back and forth through the Bible, but the key, I found, was in Romans 1. Right after Paul has said, "I'm so proud of the good news. This good news has great power to heal and save those who respond with faith. This good news is that God is righteous. Righteous in all he's done. Righteous in his attitude towards sinners. Righteous in his handling of rebellion in his universe." And immediately in verse 18, he begins to talk about God's wrath. Has he changed the subject? 2 verses on the good news and 18 to 32 on God's wrath. Is God's wrath bad news? To me, an understanding of God's wrath that I find running all through Scripture is great good news and consistent with his righteousness. The wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and wickedness of men, who by their wickedness do the most destructive thing of all. They suppress the truth. That's what Satan was doing in heaven. They couldn't detect any other error. Some thought he still was a saint, but he was subtly suppressing and twisting the truth. And so it goes on to describe people who could have known God. He revealed himself to them. It's in our Sabbath school lessons of last week and coming up again this week. They're without excuse. But look what happens to these people who, in verse 21, though they knew God, did not honor him as God or give thanks to him. What happened to them? They became futile in their thinking, and their senseless minds were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools. God didn't make them fools. They became fools when they turned against the truth. Look how foolish they became. They exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man or birds or animals or reptiles. Here is our infinitely gracious, intelligent God trying to reveal himself to people. And they'd rather turn, as the Egyptians did, and worship crocodiles, beetles, frogs, flies. If you were God, trying to reveal yourself as the kind of person we know God to be, and you saw people turning from you to kneel down in front of a frog. Here it's evening worship. The whole family's gathered around the frog. Dear Lord Frog, bless Mommy, bless Daddy, help us to be like you. It seems incredible, but that's exactly what happened. We become like the thing we worship and admire. People who worship beasts became like beasts. People who worshipped immoral gods became like them. It's the whole history of religion. Now, what does the Bible say God did to people who'd rather worship frogs and flies and Dagon and Moloch and Baal and Ashtaroth? What did he do? Did he beat them up? Would you if you'd been God? Verse 24. Therefore God gave them up to what they wanted. Why? Verse 25. Because they exchanged the truth about God for a lie. That's the whole great controversy. And they worshipped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. For this reason, God gave them up to dishonorable passions. And what follows is horrible, but it's historical. You can look it up. This is what people did when they gave up God. And he couldn't force them, so he gave them up. And again in verse 28, since they did not see fit to acknowledge God, for the third time it says, God gave them up to a base mind and to improper conduct. And look what follows. Now, this idea was not new with Paul. I didn't know how much it was in the Bible until I saw it in Romans 1, and now it's all the way through. God reluctantly, but finally, in this free universe of his, having to give people up to what they prefer to do. One of the saddest places is in the book of Hosea, as God is about to give up his Sabbath-keeping people in Old Testament times. In Hosea 11 is the most moving description of this, and I'll read it from Phillips. He's only done 3.5 books of the Old Testament in print so far. I just hope he can do more. It's magnificent. Hosea 11, God speaking. When Israel was young, I came to love him, and I called him out of Egypt to be my son. But the more I called them, the further they went from me. They made sacrifices to the Baals and burnt incense to idols. Yet it was I who taught Ephraim to walk, picking them up in my arms. Yet they never knew that it was I who healed their bruises. I led them with gentle encouragement. Their harness was a harness of love. I treated them like the man who eases the yoke to free the jaws. Yes, I bent down to them and gave them food. He literally did. But they must return to the land of Egypt, or Assyria must be their king, because they have refused to turn to me. So the sword shall whirl around in their cities, break the defense of their gates, and destroy them within their fortresses. My people are bent on turning away from me. The yoke is all they are fit for. I can love them no more. But how, oh, how can I give you up, Ephraim? How, oh, how can I hand you over, Israel? The exact words in Romans 1. As I understand it, God's wrath is simply his turning away in loving disappointment from those who do not want him anyway, thus leaving them to the inevitable but awful consequences of their own rebellious choice. Could any sentence be worse than for God to say, God who is patience personified and would give his life to restore us, for that person to say, leave him alone. There's nothing more we can do. That's the most final and awful sentence that could ever be pronounced by the infinite physician when he says, for this case there is no remedy. This cannot be healed. Leave him alone. That would terrify me much more than hearing an angry person in wrath denouncing me. It might even stir me to defend myself. But when the one who loves us, with tears in his eyes and his voice, says, Ephraim is joined unto idols, let her alone, then we know we're all through when he gives us up. Now, what happens to a person when God gives him up? What happened to Christ?